Chest up, shoulders back. This is a Revival Fitness, your home for gains and brains. And we have some breaking news here, kids. Push-pull legs tragically has passed away as of, well, it says here 7 days ago, which means it was September 18th, 2024. The day that Renaissance Periodization published this video. Push-pull legs split. You don't need the comma after legs. Is dead. Let the record show I was on here roasting PPL Brah a while ago. I mean, I was talking about the problems with push-pull legs years ago, but it's always going to be, you could say, the most popular split among general gym bros, only to be contested with the bro split itself. That's basically the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. And I do actually have a PPL split available on my site, along with 5 other programs as well, for novices and intermediates. My programs have been field tested by hundreds of people. You can see testimonials on my site as well. I break down everything you need to make serious gains in the long term, not just exercises on a PDF file. To make PPL work, you need to really control these variables, and they are ones that so many lifters, especially beginners, which is the vast majority of people in the gym by default, as well as watching this content, even if you can't admit that to yourself, that's what you are, they don't have the knowledge or the experience or the temperament, really, to control those variables properly. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Mike was advocating 2-a-day workouts not long ago. He was doing like a morning session and an evening session. I think relatively low volume for each, but you combine those all across the week, and it's a fair amount. I could be wrong about that, but I think he was doing something like push-pull legs. And you can see this comment here that says, oh, the meta is always changing. And you can see the comment below that I gave the thumbs up to. That is part of the business model of the science-based guys. It's new study. As soon as there's a new headline, everybody starts shrieking like chimpanzees, oh, the new study proves this or that. And oftentimes, it doesn't even prove what they claim it does, or it has an extremely limited sample size, really odd parameters. They have new lifters that will grow doing anything they give them. All of this science, it tends to be very muddy waters, but people proclaim this as gospel fact because it gets impressionable people to say, oh my goodness, but the science says, and they think that settles the argument. But in the name of good faith, let's see what Mike has to say.
Push-pull legs, for example, I see a use case for.
I don't know who this guy is. Oh, we got another doctor, in quotation marks.
On getting jacked, you told me, listen, this new meta-analysis came out.
One thing, I think Mike might be the only guy that blinks more than I do when recording videos. When I edit my videos, man, I see how much I blink. It makes me sick. Like, I almost consider wearing sunglasses when I record, which is kind of douchey. But, man, I think it's because I have all these lights on in front of me, and I think whenever you're just kind of riffing off the head, you tend to blink because you're thinking as you talk, but man, it's annoying.
And it's kind of about how to get jacked in general, or training for getting jacked, but it has a few unique features that it also has training frequency recommendations as well as volume. Tell us about the new meta-analysis.
As of this video, when this comes out, there should be a preprint of the meta-analysis on training frequency and muscle hypertrophy.
So we're getting the shit early.
This happened in the video I reacted to with Mike a while ago with Eric Helms. They talked about bulking is dead, as they called it. You can't have somebody just even put up, like, a graphic of the study. Like, they just say, oh, it's by whoever in colleagues. They don't even reference it fully. And then they just start talking about it. Can you at least show us the paper? Like, is that too much to ask?
Frequency seems to have a neutral to slightly positive effect on hypertrophy. So as you...
Volume equated or not?
Volume equated.
If you have to do, let's say, 12 sets per week, you can do them Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 sets, or you can do them Monday, Thursday, 6 sets.
He just gave the example of 3 times a week or 2. You could also even say 1. Say that's a bro split. You do 12 sets for a given muscle group on a bro split day. I think, without hearing their explanations just right now, the biggest benefit of breaking it up more frequently is going to be the fatigue. If you're going to do 12 sets for one muscle group in one day, let's assume you do 3 sets per exercise, 4 exercises. After that second exercise, even sooner depending on the muscle group and how heavy the lifts are and everything, you're going to be pretty tired. Whereas if you break that up into even 2 times a week, I tend to do that right now, you can essentially split that fatigue in half, same total volume per week, but you're fresher, and that freshness is going to let you lift more weight, progressively overload easier.
And what you're saying is the effect is either like, man, nothing to write home about, or like, oh, a little bit of a boost, even if the volume doesn't go up, What do you ascribe that to hypothetically?
Now, the counter argument that a lot of more old school minded people make is that you want to do everything on the same day, or most things on one day, because that fatigue is what enhances the muscle growth. So they'll say like, oh, by the time you're on that third or fourth exercise and you're really exhausted and you're still pushing yourself, that's when you're really building the muscle. So there's different camps on that. I'm not sure what the science formally says, and even then there's all kinds of branches of the science, right?
There's a variety of things. Mechanistically, whenever you train a muscle, that growth curve response only lasts so long. So even if you blast a muscle with more and more volume in a single bout, that myofibrillar hypertrophy. Oh, he said it. Oh man, I need to take a shot of something. Maybe Tren. Muscle growth essentially will only take so long.
Several days.
Correct.
Not 8 days, not 7 days, probably not 6 or 5.
Correct.
More like 2 to 3.
Correct. So if you're only training a muscle once a week, you're missing out on 3 or 4 days out of that week where you're not growing that muscle.
At least neutral. Correct. And then you grow it again and at least neutral. Missed opportunity to get more growth.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
To be clear, the effect is somewhere between there is next to none and there's a slight positive effect.
Slight positive.
So if we want to maximize muscle growth, we probably want to err on the side of training your muscle a bit more often.
All right. Notice what he just said there. He said it ranges from like no benefit to slightly positive. Like I mentioned earlier, in relation to what? Can we see the studies? Can we see the data? You know, do we have any charts here? Do we have any reference? You see what I mean? Like, they're just shooting the shit here about these studies, but we don't see the studies. Truly, I just can't believe like a channel that is so hammered into science as RP is, and we don't even have graphics or anything. Like, what are your editors doing? On top of that, what are you guys doing? Like, is Mike, he has an iPad, is he going to pull up something and show us?
Because there's nothing to be lost, but there is potentially a small effect to be gained.
Train a muscle a little bit more frequently, but with the same volume. In those extra sets on the fewer sessions at the end, you're kind of a little bit tired.
That's right. That's what I just mentioned earlier.
And maybe your stimulus isn't as great as if you were more fresh.
I'm aware of a upcoming analysis.
Oh, another one. Oh boy.
On the topic of per session volume. Most of our studies are on high volumes, but training a muscle 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
We have very few studies on frequencies of like 4, 5, 6 times a week per muscle.
I don't know in what circumstance somebody's going to be training a muscle 5, 6 times a week. Unless it's like teenagers spamming lateral raises or guys in their room just doing push-ups and sit-ups every day. Some guys do like chin-ups every day. You know, they'll be like, oh, I blew up my back doing chin-ups every single day. It's like, okay, maybe you did. Maybe you could have got the same thing just doing it once or twice a week.
With a previous analysis by Krieger, James Krieger, for example, on per session volume.
Again, he just cited another study. We don't know the name of it, any other information.
With a bit of speculation and a bit of theory crafting.
Theory crafting. Yeah, it describes a lot of the so-called science today, that's for sure.
Leads me to think, practically speaking, if you're training with really high volumes, if we want to maximize that area under the curve, we're better off spreading that high volume across more sessions.
I agree.
Because we get such strong diminishing returns on a per session basis.
Yes.
And so if you're doing, say, 20, 30 plus sets for a muscle, fractionally speaking, counting both direct volume and indirect.
All right, he just said 20 to 30 sets a week. Truly, man, I don't know who on earth is doing up to 30 sets a week if you're training truly hard. One, you can't do that, especially bigger muscles like the legs. Good luck with that, no matter how many guys in the comments pretend like they're doing so. Oh, bro, okay, sure you do, bro. Second of all, even, we get to a time component. Do you have anything else to do? I mean, if you're like Mike and you can train all day, every day for a living, and then you can just kind of sit down, record videos, and then people do your thumbnails, the editing, the audio, all that other stuff, maybe. Even though, you know, all you guys watching, you may have a visual of yourself as a so-called bodybuilder, but you're not. Even if you're just obsessed with your physique on a recreational level, something's got to give eventually. I mean, it's going to interfere with your life. A lot of lifters, though, that consume this type of content, they don't really have lives outside of just eating and training and sleeping and watching videos about eating and training and sleeping.
Did they look at unconstrained volume as well?
They did not. However, they looked at a variety of potential moderators. So they performed subgroup analyses based on training status, whether they were more untrained or at least slightly trained.
There's another problem I talked about before. Very, very loose definitions. We took novice lifters. Okay, what does that mean? I've seen a few studies say, like, we took so-called experienced male trainees, or they'll call them even advanced lifters, bodybuilders, whatever, and they'll be like, whose estimated 1 rep max on the barbell back squat was 275 pounds or something, and you're like, that's your definition of advanced. Often they'll go by time frame too. So they'll say, oh, these subjects are so-called advanced lifters because they've all reported, once again, reported, very key because you can't prove this stuff just based on what people tell you in that context. They've all self-reported to have been training for 8 years. That doesn't mean you're advanced. Most people who've been in the gym 8 years are still novice level in terms of their strength and their development. Lots and lots and lots of confounding factors when it comes to all this stuff, and people just completely wipe that away.
For most populations, in most contexts, whether you're training to failure, as a rough ballpark, train each muscle at least twice a week.
I've been following that philosophy pretty much for the past few years. I didn't reference any research. I wasn't sitting there reading through papers or anything, but I think intuitively you can figure that out just based on the fatigue aspect, like I said. And a lot of proven programs, a lot of the ones I have as well, follow that same style, 2 times a week frequency. I have an old video, you can check it out in the top corner. C-Bum is on the thumbnail. It says, were we wrong about the bro split? And I referenced some papers there. I don't see there being a drawback of 2 times a week frequency. Kind of like they're saying here, if it's totally neutral, okay, sure. But if anything, there's something to be gained, I would think. Even if it's a minor advantage, right? Everybody talks about optimal all the time. Everybody's about squeaking out that extra 0.01%. So the consistency, the intensity, and the progressive overload is what really matters here.
I would say there's kind of an inflection point where after twice a week, there's maybe a positive effect, but it's very minimal.
So significantly different returns from 1 to 2 versus 2 to 3.
Practically, I would say so. You are better off training each muscle twice a week than once a week.
Yeah.
Past that, it's probably a neutral positive effect, but it's a very slight one if there is one.
The more you increase the weekly frequency, the more volume per session is going to have to go down. I typically say 12 sets a week is plenty. I think 16 sets a week for a given muscle group is on the high end, in my book, because I push myself pretty darn hard.
So practically that means that if you are training 2 days a week, for example, you're someone who doesn't have much time, you should almost certainly be training with full body split.
Yeah, I mean, if you only have 2 days a week, I don't see why you wouldn't.
Likewise, if you're training, say, 4 days a week, you're likely better off with something like an upper-lower split.
There we go. I've been telling you guys about the upper-lower for frickin' years now. Flagship program over here, the baseline template I use to hit the 315 bench, and all kinds of other things. And I use that to prepare for my show as well.
Just like with volume, they looked at frequency fractionally. Direct instances of training a muscle, like for example for the biceps, doing bicep curls would be a direct instance. Indirect instances, where for example doing back training, would still target the biceps, but just not as well, where essentially they counted direct bicep training as 1 unit of training frequency for the biceps, and back training as half a unit of training frequency for the biceps.
Yeah, if you want to do sets per week, I've done that as well, like full sets versus half sets. You can kind of muddy the waters with that, but just for general counting parameters, I understand doing that.
It would be a lie to say that 16 sets of back work on a Friday
Does nothing.
After a Monday and Wednesday bicep workout doesn't have any more effect on biceps. It would also be a lie to say that it counts for 16 sets of biceps, but it might count for something like 4 to 12.
Like I just said, did you see how broad that range is? 4 to 12, we're talking a 3 times multiplier potentially.
Training a muscle once a week, probably not ideal. But if you modify it a little bit, say instead of just doing Monday chest, Tuesday back, Wednesday shoulders, Thursday legs, and Friday arms, you add in some compound training for your arm day. You do some chin-ups, and you do some bench pressing. Maybe you add a couple of leg exercises on your shoulder day.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, for most muscle groups, you're actually training them 1.5 or 2 times a week.
That is a concept, at least I call it, I think other people have said this too in the past, exercise overlap. This is one of the hidden things about the bro split. This is why you may actually get 2 times frequency for given muscles. I would say legs, typically not on the bro split, because legs have their own day and it's all kind of lumped in there. Maybe if you do some type of deadlift on the back day, you get some hamstring and glute too. But most guys doing the bro split, they don't give a shit about training their legs, let alone twice a week, not even 1 time a week. Let's be real. On the typical push-pull legs, I talk to guys all the time. They'll do the push-pull legs the first half. They're going to skip the legs on the second block, guaranteed. They're probably going to skip or at least half-ass the first PPL block when it comes to the legs as well. I mean, guys are always going to find ways to sandbag or just outright avoid their leg training. It's a tale as old as time. It's never going to stop. But say you've got a typical, like he mentioned, Monday's chest, and then Thursday or Friday you do, say, arms. A lot of people on their arm days were going to do something like a close grip bench press. Close grip bench press also works the chest. Maybe it's shoulder day, you do seated military, dumbbell press, overhead press, whatever it's going to be. That also works the triceps. Back day, you do pull-ups, also works the biceps. You see what I mean? So there's always going to be that aspect of overlap too. So the bro split in its core form is 1 time a week frequency on paper, but oftentimes it's not going to only be that when it's actually applied. But like Mike was saying, how much do we count that for in terms of the half sets or what percentage? So you can't really quantify this formally, and your body's not doing math either when it comes to this stuff.
Better technique, better effort, better follow through, less likely to slough off on later sets.
Correct.
This set number 7 of legs, you're like, man, I'll do it, but I'm not going to do it.
If you guys want to just differentiate, and I'm not even saying I'm in this group because I'm still a bro at heart, you know, I have to get myself amped up kind of to really push with leg training. The true masochists are the ones that have like a full leg day and they push the whole thing. They're doing like hack squats, leg press, leg extensions, maybe even barbell squats, right? Heavier leg exercises and even the isolations, and they're just hammering it the entire way through. The people that push hardcore intensity through all of that, they got the power of Jesus with them or something else, man. I mean, they got to fight demons. They got something's really driving them because that takes Herculean effort to really push yourself through that. More so with legs than anything else. Upper body can be tough too, of course, but just pushing your legs that hard, there's nothing that compares to it. If you've ever seen it in person, it's a spectacle to behold.
So I think with specialization phases where you're performing higher volumes, or if you want to get the most out of each set, a slightly higher frequency can be beneficial.
All right, one thing there, he said specialization phases. 90% of you guys watching are beginners. I get guys comment, dude, should I do a specialization phase for my arms, my delts, my chest? Do one for your entire body. Just do your freaking program. You're a novice. You need to grow everywhere, bro.
It's not going to be a night and day effect, but I think if you want to optimize your growth, slightly higher frequencies are probably a good idea.
We're about 11 minutes in. I think we're starting to really talk in circles here. He said that like 5 times to this point.
I think it's a personal preference thing for a lot of people. But even for the 1 time a week, your recommendation is like, okay, fuck it. You like once a week? Sweet. Monday, hit chest like crazy. Hit a few sets of triceps after, though. And then Thursday, hit your tricep workout. Your biceps, say arms Thursday arms, back, shoulders, arms, and legs never shows up.
Right. Some people do like that. And I think one of the biggest reasons is that some people like to focus on just one muscle group. For some reason, they find that easier to do. I can't relate to that. I can jump from body part to body part and lock in and everything. That's never been an issue for me. Another thing too, when you're really exhausted, you do say 10, 12, 15 sets of chest in one day. Your pump is going to be pretty gnarly. You're going to be full of blood. You're going to be all swelled up. You get to take better pictures that way. So the pump factor is very real, especially, I was going to say just for dudes, but even for women. You know, a lot of girls train their lower bodies, their glutes this way too. You get that big pump, you look better in pictures, you feel better with the pump, your self-esteem is tied to it. It can be hard to let that go for some people.
Do a couple of sets of close grip presses or push-ups after your tricep stuff. It'll cook your triceps even better, but it'll get you enough of a stimulus for chest that you're definitely benefiting from multiple per week frequencies.
Like I said earlier, I'm way ahead of these guys, man.
And I think people can think of frequency of training kind of like protein.
Okay.
Total protein intake is fairly important for hypertrophy. And you want to make sure you're getting enough protein each day to maximize hypertrophy. But exactly what your meal frequency is in a given day, like whether you're having 3 or 4 meals or 4 or 6 or what have you, doesn't seem to play nearly as large of a role.
This was a number of years ago, I think. Even now, some people might still say this, but they would say, oh, well, you can only absorb 30 grams of protein max or something at one time. I don't know exactly what that was for, maybe to sell protein and get people to space it throughout the day to take more, but even so, if you can only even eat 1 meal a day, if you can condense 200 grams of protein into that meal, if you have to, you have to, it's going to be hard to eat that much in one sitting. I certainly would struggle to do that, but it's not going to negatively impact you. It's not like your body just rejects it. Oh, we don't need that at all and gets rid of it.
It's the same with volume and frequency, where volume seems to be quite important for hypertrophy, as we've discussed. But exactly how you spread that out plays potentially a small role, but certainly not as large as volume.
I don't know what his recommendations are for volume. If he's friends with Mike and in the same camp, it's probably upwards of 20 a week. Depends on the context, though, but more volume is not the answer, just broadly speaking.
It's a good idea to do a 2x or more, even if you just train twice a week.
Realistically, though, I don't know how many people watching this content are only training 2 times a week. It has to be less than 3% training 2 times a week. That has to be a rare case. Most of the guys that watch this content obsessively, they go to the gym almost every single day. Like, I have to talk to them in consultation calls and tell them, dude, stop going to the gym every single freaking day.
4 to 5 days a week is where upper lower starts to become more viable because it allows you to train each muscle twice a week at least. If you're doing a 5-day split, for example, you could do upper, lower, upper, lower, upper.
I've been starting to toy with that myself. You could also do upper, lower arms. And you could also maybe include a little bit of delts with the arms too. Or any other areas you want to kind of clean up more so. You could add them onto that extra 5th day. It doesn't have to just be an arm day. That's how I outline it in my program. You could also do something like push-pull legs, upper, lower. Which in a way is upper, lower, upper. Essentially, just we're going from anterior to posterior. But that's what I've been on for a while here.
And I think push-pull legs, for example, I see a use case for, but it's only for those who are consistently training 6 days a week or more.
Well, that's interesting because a lot of people, and I would recommend this too, if you're going to do push-pull legs, I don't think it has to be 6 days a week. I would prefer it to be 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. Then you would repeat it and it would become an asynchronous schedule, essentially. A lot of people do push-pull legs and they go back-to-back. So they do PPL, then they take 1 rest day on the weekend, usually on a Sunday. And that can have its own problems, as I've talked about in many videos before. Fatigue's going to be the biggest one, on top of the scheduling and other things. I mean, you cannot overstate the importance of rest days, man. I mean, especially we're talking average lifters, they've got lives, no PEDs, just natural dudes. You need to rest. I mean, rest is important at all levels, but especially with those factors, you're going to bury yourself if you're not resting sufficiently. Even if you are making decent gains, I mean, you have more chances of, you got the joint pain, lingering little problems like that, your low back hurts. Taking even a little bit extra time to rest can really ease those problems up if you're facing them.
A body part split can work, but you need to be smart about it, essentially. You need to make sure you're making those modifications to your routine to make each muscle be trained at least twice a week.
Okay, I think we're getting pretty freaking redundant here at this point.
How many sets per muscle per session would you say starts to be a little much for optimal hypertrophy? I've heard 8, I've heard 12, I've heard 6. What is your take on that on average?
Hard to say because it depends on the person and the exercises being done. I'm going to say around 6 to 8 if you're training truly hard. Not like Mike trains, okay? I'm talking like you're pushing yourself to where the weight's really slowing down. 1 RIR at the most. Some of them you might take to legit failure. I'd say 6 to 8 in that context, but the less close you get to failure, the more you could handle.
I have essentially set a limit of around 5 to 8 sets per session.
Like I just said.
So for every 5 to 8 sets, direct sets, you do per week for a muscle, I would add 1 extra day of training. I think that's a rough ballpark and a heuristic I use.
That makes perfect sense. That's it?
The music's starting to play. It must be getting to be closing time. All right, so all that science to come to the same conclusions that I did a number of years ago, it seems like, and I don't have any formal degrees or high-ranking academic credentials. Bro science wins again. Suck it, nerds. But this has been it for me, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure, if you want to apply these principles mentioned here, check out my training programs down below. Everything laid out for you to make the most of your time in the gym. And check out my nutrition guide as well to get on the right path, whether bulking, cutting, or recompositioning. Get in direct contact with me on Patreon if you would like to, and you'll get lifetime access to our Discord server there, and use my links down below to save money on some great products and services. And I will catch you guys next time.